Whether you like Mr. Trump or you don't, he's a human being with a family. This is unacceptable behavior in the United States of America.
The country and world still coming to terms with former President Donald Trump's near assassination.
It's an unbelievable moment in American history. And
now we're hearing from a retired detective sergeant who previously worked presidential protective detail for Trump himself.
there's a lot of things that went right that day, but some things definitely did not go right.
Plus, his view on the now deceased gunman.
One 20-year-old individual, one loser from Pennsylvania, who's failed at everything in his life, and he failed at doing this too.
All eyes are now on Butler, Pennsylvania, and the shocking act that unfolded there on July 13th. It was about 6 o'clock that evening when former President Donald Trump took the stage there for a political rally. But just minutes into his speech, the unthinkable. Shocking photos and video show the aftermath as Trump can be seen with blood covering his face. A bullet had grazed and struck his right ear. Within seconds of the initial shooting, the Secret Service was shielding Trump, and soon word came that the shooter had been killed.
Move to spare. Hold. When you're ready. On you.
Ready?
Move.
Up.
Move. Go.
Up. Hawkeye's here.
Hawkeye's here. Move it to the spare.
Spare, get ready. Spare, get ready.
We ready?
Shooter's down. Shooter's down.
Are we good?
Shooter's down.
Shooter's down. Are we good to move?
Shooter's down. We're good to move.
Clear.
We're
Let's
clear.
move.
We're
Let's
clear.
move.
We're clear.
Former President Trump was then evacuated from the rally and taken to Butler Memorial Hospital to be evaluated. Two other people, 57-year-old David Dutch and 74-year-old James Copenhaver, were shot and injured, but are now in stable condition. 50-year-old Corey Compatour, a volunteer fire chief, was killed during the incident as he shielded his family from gunfire. The gunman has since been identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from the Pittsburgh suburb of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Following the shooting, investigators found explosive devices in his vehicle and home. Officials say the shooter borrowed his dad's AR-15 rifle the day of the rally, claiming he was going to the shooting range, something he'd done in the past. There's also record that the gunman purchased 50 rounds of ammunition at a gun shop before the shooting and ordered additional ammo online. Right now, investigators are still working to determine a motive in the attack and have sent the shooter's cell phone to Quantico, Virginia, where FBI techs are going through it. But that's just the start when it comes to questions about the attempted assassination. To dig deeper, I sat down with retired Detective Sergeant Ashton Packe, who previously worked presidential protective detail for Trump. Just to start, how did this even happen?
And never attribute to malice what can be attributed through incompetence, lack of situational awareness, lack of training, or breakdowns of communication. My personal thoughts are, I think that what happened here was you have President Trump at the moment, being a former president of the United States. Secret Service has protocols for how they protect former presidents of the United States, even though he is the clear frontrunner for the Republican nomination, and even though we are at the time technically before the Republican National Convention and his formal nomination. I believe maybe some bosses there should have called an audible and said, hey, we need to up the security posture of Secret Service for President Trump because he is soon to be the nominee. I think probably you have, Secret Service works intricately with local law enforcement as they did when I was law enforcement here in Southern Nevada. And so you have police officers from that local jurisdiction. I don't know how large that jurisdiction is. I don't know how many resources that they have. So when a former president comes to a large city like Las Vegas or Los Angeles, large agencies can throw a lot of resources and a lot of bodies towards safeguarding that perimeter. And I don't know if they had that in this situation. And ultimately, I think it was just probably a breakdown of communication.
That communication breakdown could have come in the way of security coverage. Some reports say that the Secret Service was responsible for the inner areas, and it was local authorities who were responsible for the outer perimeter, including the rooftop that the would-be assassin shot from.
I think, I'm going to go on a gut feeling, and having read some reports, I think maybe the local cops were kind of in charge or informally in charge of the outer perimeter. I think Secret Service owned inside that venue and everything within several yards of it. And so I think you just had probably breakdowns of communication. I think you had people confused in the situation of the moment. I think some people might maybe considered a person on a roof with a rifle. Maybe they're thinking, is that another law enforcement officer? Did we miss something? Is that a SWAT guy? We just don't know. And ultimately, we want information immediately. That's what feeds the algorithm, and people want to be able to push out, I know the exact thing that happened, and you just can't possibly know if you weren't there and you weren't a part of that cadre or that contingency.
Packe has more than a decade worth of law enforcement experience and a history with high-profile security. But one of the reasons that I wanted to speak to you is specifically because you said you'd worked presidential protective detail in the past, even with Trump. So can you explain that to me just generally?
Sure. So U.S. Secret Service is the primary agency, obviously responsible for safeguarding current, former presidents and their families. For any kind of a visit by a president or a former president, the local field office of the Secret Service generally is responsible for doing what's called an advance. They'll conduct a site assessment. They'll send agents from the local field office, maybe some agents from the Washington D.C., the main place of the Secret Service will go out to a location, and they'll conduct that advanced site assessment. And they're looking for things like heightened rooftops, places that an elevated shooter could be positioned in. They're looking for places that they need to safeguard, to lock down, to make sure that they understand and own that space. And anytime you do executive protection or dignitary protection, from what I do in retirement now as executive protection all the way to the Secret Service safeguarding the current president of the United States, you just lay overlapping rings of security and safety around that protectee or that person.
Packe says experts would have visited the location ahead of the rally to scope out possible areas of concern. Then, the day of the rally, there would be additional counter-surveillance teams.
And so the advanced team will go out, they'll do a site assessment, and they're the ones who come up with the plan. They'll create an incident action plan or an IAP. And part of the advanced team will be reaching out and working with local law enforcement, because there's only so many Secret Service agents in the world, and many of them are dedicated to what they have to do in their current fields and their mission. So using local law enforcement is like it's an obvious force multiplier. And they will lean heavily on local law enforcement to help safeguard that perimeter location. So the advanced team does a site assessment. Once the protectee is in the area where they're going to be conducting their speech or whatever, the rally, like what we saw with President Trump, you'll have the protective detail, which is assigned directly to the protectee, and then you'll have a counter surveillance team. And the counter surveillance team are the men and women who look like they're just part of the crowd. They will be looking for anomalies, looking for things that just don't stand out, suspicious activity in the area.
Packe says he worked this detail for former President Trump when he visited Las Vegas.
In my experience, when I was, working on the job, I was embedded both either with the counter surveillance team, working with agents, or we were on the line with the protective detail, helping, safeguard the president or the former president, just depending on who it was. You're basically working hand in hand with agents. You're looking for the anomalies. You're looking for threats in the very moment. The protective detail is, in my opinion, the easy job, because everybody who gets close to the president within the locations that the crowds are allowed, they've all been screened by the uniform division. They've all been through magnetometers, and all their bags have been searched. It's kind of like being in the backside of an airport. You'd like to think that no guns have made it through, no knives, no ceramic weapons, nothing like that. And the uniform division of Secret Service does an amazing job in screening those sites. Counter surveillance it's kind of fun, because you get to dress kind of like in an undercover capacity, but you're out there actually doing, you're looking for the anomalies. It's a little bit more of the psychology of like, hey, why is everyone cheering and that one guy isn't? Why is he wearing sunglasses inside and no one else is? It's little things that, those little human behavior indicators that we're trained in law enforcement to look for, just things of that nature. And so it just depends on where we were at that day and where I was needed.
This type of security brought Packe face to face with high-profile politicians.
And ultimately, it's you get to the back of the house and you get to meet these people, and you find out that every president, every former president and their families are all human. They're human beings. They have fears and emotions. You get to see the human when you're, in the back of the house of that hotel where, they're getting ready to go out or they've already spoken and they're taking a few minutes to shake hands and take pictures with the cops. So my experience working with all the former presidents and the current president at the moment, just depending on who was in office, was they were always very kind and respectful and very nice to the law enforcement officers and took time out of their day to converse and speak to us. And so it was nice. You get to see the human being behind the facade of what they put on their face when they step up to a podium.
In the case of Saturday's attempted assassination, Packe says there could have been a breakdown in that counter-surveillance team, the same type of detail he'd previously worked.
So I have a suspicion that maybe the surveillance team or the counter-surveillance team wasn't necessarily close enough to that rooftop. Maybe they were inside of the actual rally itself. That rally is extremely safe. That rally is, the uniform division will come out with magnetometers. They screen out all the bags. They screen all the people. So it's a fairly safe environment. So I'm not sure what happened here. I'm not sure. So again, we'll have to wait to see what happens in this after action report to find out, hey, where was the counter surveillance team? What did the advance team come up with? Was that rooftop identified as a potential, a location of a potential where a threat could have emanate from? Who owned it? Who was in charge of that space? I saw a report that a local law enforcement officer confronted the gunman and he pointed a rifle. And then you hear this preliminary report of, he ducked away. It scared him. And then I read that he fell. The officer was going up onto the roof. And when he ducked from, obvious natural reaction to having a rifle pointed at him, he fell off the ladder. If that's the case, then, they were trying to own that space as quickly as they could. I think what they could have done better is maybe put, a person on that roof. But again, how many rallies have they gone to? How many is what we call, this is just another day that ends in Y. It's like another rally. And it's hard to keep that edge. It's hard to keep, sharp in that you train for this worst case scenario, but then a communication breakdown and all of a sudden, we came so close to having such a bad incident, what could have been a horrible moment in American history. So whether you love the man or you hate the man, we do not solve our political differences through assassinations. I cannot stress to people enough how bad it could have been and how bad this could have been for America.
Then there's the matter of who was supposed to protect what area.
Now, one of the overarching themes about this specific attempted assassination is the communication breakdown, specifically between the state, the local authorities, and then the feds. So a lot of people are saying that this potentially could have been the local authorities were covering that area, the rooftop. Is this something that Secret Service should have made sure that they were covering that area? What do you think happened there?
Well, hindsight is always 20/20. I mean, now, if the head of the Secret Service had a time machine, they'd go back in time and this never would have happened. So, of course, we can always point fingers and say, hey, Secret Service should have owned that. I have a feeling that, in having understanding the ballistics of some of the rifles that the counter snipers deploy, those counter snipers are able to take shots out to 1,000 yards. So they're capable, extremely capable, highly trained individuals who can own any threat up to 10 football fields away. Anyone who understands ballistics knows that if those counter snipers saw the threat on the roof at 150 yards, but their sights are kind of set up for 1,000-yard, 800,000-yard shot, they're going to have to take a few seconds to adjust what's called their dope of their rifle scope. So this is why in larger cities, especially here in Las Vegas, we would put a SWAT contingent, a local SWAT officer who's capable of handling something intermediate. So something out 200, 300 yards away, because we understand the ballistic nature of how you have to adjust your equipment from 1,000 yards to a 150-yard shot.
As for the Secret Service reaction time, Packe says it was immediate.
I think all the agents in their individual roles performed exemplary. I see some horrible things being said about Secret Service online by people who were not there. And in all reality, a situation that probably was from start to finish, 7, 8, maybe 10 seconds at most. I think each individual in their mission space handled themselves great. I watched the video. I think it was less than 3 seconds before multiple agents were flinging themselves on the body of President Trump to protect him from any more threat. They got him out of there as quickly as they could. Once they, hey, why didn't they rush him off stage as fast as possible? Well, if they have information that the shooter's down and they can shield him very well, they trained for this moment. And you can even tell that President Trump was kind of prepared for something because he got down very quickly. So clearly, they train with their protectees. They've trained with the president. I'm sure even today, President Biden knows what his detail wants him to do if a certain word is said. I think it was probably the shift leader or the team lead scream to the president, get down. So everyone in their moment, everyone in their individual capacity, the counter snipers, the agents on the protective detail, the counter assault team members who ran up on stage with the intermediate weapon, that M4 AR-15 variant weapon, they all did their jobs right.
In previous coverage, we spoke with the author of Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. He's also the former assistant director for counterintelligence with the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi. Figliuzzi says he saw the situation differently.
The Secret Service's own language on their own website describes their mission as zero fail. Clearly, what happened on Saturday in Pennsylvania was a failure. And I don't think you'll find a credible Secret Service agent that will try to talk you out of that sad reality. This was a failure. And ultimately, whether we learn that really the police were supposed to cover that building and or that roof, the buck stops on the desk of the Secret Service. It was their security plan. It's their responsibility. They'll need to step up and say that.
I've spoken with past FBI agents who said this was a failure. The fact that the trigger was even pulled is a failure at all. But then what I'm hearing from you is this was maybe 10 seconds total. The shooter was taken out relatively quickly. Not that many shots were fired. So what do you think? Was this a failure or not a success, so to speak, but it could have been much worse?
It's a failure in the sense that as people in the protection world, myself in private sector now, Secret Service agents, diplomatic security service from the State Department, whoever does the protecting of people, dignitaries, politicians, Capitol Police, all those folks, we want to stay what's called left of bang in the world of protection, because that's where we gather information and intelligence, and we keep those shots from ever ringing out. So yes, it's a failure in the sense that they went right of bang. Once they were right of bang, it was all reactionary. There's no proactive work at that point. That's where we got very lucky. That's where, if you believe in higher power, angels, whatever you want to call it, circumstance, luck. I'm from Vegas. Sometimes it's just, you just get lucky. We got very lucky, on that day. So as protectees or as protectors, we have to stay left of bang. We have to gather information. We had information that this guy is there. That's where the failure falls. The problem came in probably the breakdown of communication on who owned that roof and how was that person sighted by people, seen by individuals, alerts law enforcement. Why wasn't he stopped sooner? Why wasn't he stopped? That's where the crux of this nature, that's what the crux of this investigation will come around. So to each individual agent, just doing what they're trained to do, they did a great job. But the communication breakdown is what we need to find out. How did this happen? And how do we prevent this from happening again?
A lot of critics are saying that the security there that day ignored some of the warnings. We've seen the cell phone video of people in the crowd at the rally saying, hey, there's someone on the roof over there.
He's going down!
Some people are saying that these warnings were ignored. But what do you think? Were they just processing the information? What may have happened?
Yeah, I think it could have been. It's kind of like that Spider-Man meme. They're all same Spider-Man are pointing at each other. Who's in charge? We saw this in Uvalde. Who's in charge? Who's making the decision? We've gotten to this point in government work, especially in law enforcement, where nobody wants to don't get in trouble is the number one rule. It's not protect the citizens and serve their needs and keep yourself safe. It's don't get in trouble. Don't embarrass us. Imagine if that had been just a local SWAT sniper not realizing, not in communication, and they had taken a shot and killed a law enforcement officer. Imagine that. people are hesitant to take life, cops are very hesitant in 2024 to use deadly force. And you should be hesitant. You should make sure that all your boxes are being checked. That's a very serious matter. I think ultimately, again, it's going to come down to, was it the state police? Was it the local police? Was it Secret Service? That's where we have to, and no blame game. Everyone owns a piece of that responsibility of the failure of communication that day.
Packe says the change of command may have had some issues, but there's also the possibility that some security lacked major experience.
I think that who's in charge, who makes the decision, and you're a 22-year-old cop just out of the academy. Hey, you need to come in and work overtime on your day off. We have, former President Trump here, and you're standing out 150 yards away, and all of a sudden, the onus is on you. You just got out of training. You're not exactly a 20-year, 10-year, been there, done that police officer. Now what? There's so many things that could go in, the factors that could go into this as to why something happened, like this happened. And again, they could have been scurrying. They could have been, hey, we need a body over here. Well, my boss has told me, do not leave this gate perimeter post because this is mission critical. If I leave this opens it up to maybe an additional threat. So lots of finger pointing. It's very easy to Monday morning quarterback something that you weren't a part of, you weren't there. So I think ultimately, like I said, I think it's going to come down to who's in charge, who makes the decision on covering that roof, who did we delineate clearly in the incident action plan? Did we had a plan, we had something put together, who was in charge of that roof? If it's local PD and they didn't realize that they had to get up on that roof, then that's on them. They're going to have to come up with, plans for the future.
There will still be many unanswered questions until a formal report is released.
I'm going to give it until the after action report comes out, which will be in a year. And by then, all this will be, the election will be over. The oath for the office, whether it's Biden or Trump, will have been taken. Whoever wins is going to win. And, but I'm very eager to see the investigation, which is, unlike TV, it doesn't happen in 46 minutes. It takes months, years, sometimes to get all the information, conduct all the interviews, find out what went right, find out what went wrong, and what we need to do better in the future.
Packe is also eager for more information about the shooter.
I think I really want to see the profile of the shooter. I think it was amateur hour on his half. One 20-year-old individual, one loser from Pennsylvania, who's failed at everything in his life, and he failed at doing this too. But he knew he's going to go out in infamy. His name will live forever. And I always say, don't say their names, because we need to think about the victims. And there was a victim in that crowd that day, not just President Trump, but a man who lost his life protecting his wife and daughter. How did we get here? It's a failure to imagine. And we have to, as the protectors, as the cops, as the security professionals, we have to stay left of bang through information gathering, counter surveillance teams, suspicious activity reporting, things of this nature.
In order to prevent future tragedies, Packe suggests everyone report red flags or things they find suspicious to the authorities.
Cops, protectors, security people, we've got our work cut out for us this, the rest of this summer and coming into the fall up into the election. So, to the cops out there, keep your heads up. If you're, security personnel, keep your eyes open. And to everyday citizens, we know when to call 911. You know when you see the felony crime in front of you, you're like, this is 911. I'm calling the police or the firefighters right now. But when you see weird things, who do you call? You see this odd behavior, suspicious activity, just report it. So many people are like, oh yeah, I saw something, I saw him at the gun range shooting a life-size poster of what looks like, if we had known that, if that little blip of the radar can hit the desk of an investigator, that's being left of bang. That's that counterintelligence information, sharing. Hey, something weird was said. This guy said something, he was at my gun club. He said he's going to do something stupid, or he's going to be famous come Saturday. And I know President Trump's coming on Saturday. Just report it. Report it to the FBI. Report to your local police. And so hopefully they have a system in place in your jurisdiction to capture that information. But if they don't, call the FBI. Let the FBI know. They're very good at tracking down information and analyzing things.
Meanwhile, the FBI investigation is in full force. Officials say they've already conducted more than 100 witness interviews and received hundreds more tips online. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.